firstly, I absolutely loved the film.
That is great.
I mean,
Thank you.
Thank you.
it's exciting. It's what we come to expect from films of yours, Baz. I was wondering, I suppose, because I know you're a fan of Elvis and that you've clearly done lots of research, and I read that you read extensively to decide, I suppose, what era to pick, what angles to pick.
Yeah.
Why did you decide that now was a good time to unleash Elvis onto the world?
Well, I think really the big motivation was to sort of, as I do, because I rarely make films, was say, well, what can be useful now? And I didn't really want to do so much a biopic. I was a fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I love this idea of taking a historical figure and using their life to explore a bigger idea. Now, you know, where we are is a direct result of America in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. And you look at pop culture, Elvis is at the center of America in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s for the good, the bad, and the ugly in every possible way.
Yeah.
And the other thing is this whole idea of right now, about 5 years ago when I thought, oh, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of kind of the sell, you know, the say anything, the merchandise it, the you know, what's the truth and what's not. Now that sounds a bit highfalutin, but basically Elvis was just a really great life to explore where we are right now.
Yeah.
So,
And everybody thinks they can do it. Oh, thank you very much.
yeah, they do.
Elvis impression.
Yeah,
How did you
and they
know?
can.
They
and
can. They can. I mean, how was that?
They do.
If I'd have read for it, how was I
You were
done?
great, but they put
Yeah.
their lip up like that. They
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
well,
Thank you. How did you know you'd found your Elvis in Austin?
Well, I've told the story a bit, but I think he found me, and Oz can talk more about that. But I kept saying to myself, unless I kind of thought, oh, I'll never really find someone who can play Elvis. So luckily, I probably won't have to make the movie because it's too ambitious and it'll kill me.
It'll never happen.
Yeah, and then this amazing tape turned up, and maybe you should talk about the tape because I only learnt the truth about this tape because it was an extraordinary tape of a young man in a bathrobe playing Unchained Melody, which is a giant sing, and weeping but not acting. It wasn't acting, weeping, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
So maybe you talk about what it was.
Well, for me, from the outset, it was what you're talking about, these impersonations of Elvis. I wasn't fascinated by that. I was fascinated by behind all that, behind either, as you were saying yesterday, the Halloween costume of Elvis,
Yeah.
or the godlike figure of Elvis, where people go to Tupelo, to the house where he was born, and they kiss the floor because they revere him so much. It was stripping all of that back and finding his humanity. And so when I first started, before we'd ever met, my wonderful agent, he said, Baz has seen some of your acting, but you got to send something of you singing.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to mull it over and think, what should I send? And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll do something from his first film. So I sang Love Me Tender. And I was in my bedroom and I sang this song, and I'd studied the footage over and over, and I played it back after I filmed it, and the notes were good, the inflections were there, but it was an impersonation.
Yes.
It felt external.
Yeah.
And so I didn't send it. And I was kind of dejected by that. I thought, oh man, can I do this? How do I approach this? What's my way in? And I've been watching every documentary and reading. At that point, it was still the beginning process, so I was working my way through the books about his life. And there was this one detail, the fact that it hit me like a freight train, the fact that his mom died when he was 23, and that she was his best friend, because that was exactly my experience. My mom was my best friend, and she passed away when I was 23.
Oh, gosh.
And that was one of those details that is, it just gives you chills, because you go, it's identical.
Yeah.
And it's something I never knew about Elvis. And so I could connect. That was probably the very first key into his humanity. And so I'd heard that information, and for whatever reason, I had this dream a couple nights after the Love Me Tender tape that I had this dream that my mom was alive but dying again. And I woke up in a cold sweat, and I just felt sick, and I felt so heartbroken again. And I thought either it's going to be an awful day, or I can try to do something with this. And at this point, Elvis was the only thing that was on my mind. And so I thought, well, what would he do? And he put his emotion into song. And I didn't know what song to sing, and I didn't really feel like taping something, but I thought, you know, this is the most truthful emotion I've ever experienced, so why don't I sit down and do something with it? So I sat down at the piano, and I just set up a camera. I was in a bathrobe, and I'd just woken up, my hair's a mess, and I sat down and I started fiddling on the piano, and I started singing Unchained Melody. But rather than how I'd always sung it, which was to a romantic partner, I sang it to my mom. And all that very raw emotion was in the song. And I just filmed it one time, and I got up and I turned the camera off, and I sent that, and I said, send that to Baz.
Just thought, just do it.
Because
Yeah.
for me, it was a revelation, and how I didn't know if that's how. At that point, we hadn't spoken, so I didn't know what film he was even wanting to make.
Yeah.
But to me, I thought that is the foundation on which I want to build everything else, which is who is he at the most core level of his humanity. And so yeah, that was the tape. And then I flew to New York, and Baz and I we talked for 3 hours about Elvis and love and heartbreak and everything, and we just really I say this a lot, but there's nobody that I admire more, and you know, he's Baz. I just love him to death, and we had the best time getting to do this for 2 years. You know?
Oh, yes, we
Love
did.
that. Then, fast forward, and suddenly you're in jumpsuits and sequins and capes and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Do you miss dressing up like that?
I do.
Yeah.
You know, I do. Yeah, it's something you can't. You know, I suppose I could do it every day, but I
can do what you want,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and that's there's an incredible freedom that you feel, and just getting to live within the skin of this man who was so magnetic and extraordinary. It was the privilege of my lifetime, for sure.
You know, I got to add something. I didn't tell us this, but I mean, he lived as Elvis for 2 years. He worked with a gifted coach, Polly Bennett, on movement. But because of the pandemic, there was even a 6 months where we had a dojo, you know, day and night and day and night, doing the moves because they had to be identical. And I have a grip. People have worked with me in the crew for 30 years.
Yeah.
And there's this guy called Brett. You remember Brett? And he just
yeah.
pushes the dolly around, you know.
Yeah.
And he said over 30 years, he's probably said about 10 words to me. And he goes, oh, boss. And we were shooting Austin doing Suspicious Minds. You know. And the thing is, we shot a lot more than's in the movie. And during the break, Austin would relate to the audience like he was Elvis. It was just a show. I mean, I'm sure those extras would have paid double the money, not get paid, but paid.
Yeah.
It was like the most expensive ticket in the universe.
Yeah.
Anyway, he comes up to me and he says, mate, Baz, I've done the Star Wars, I've done Thin Red Line with Terex Malik, I've done it all, I've seen it all, but I have never seen anything like that. How is that happening? You know, that's how it was like being in the room. It was actually like, people had trouble working the cameras because it was actually like we were watching Elvis in Vegas. And it was beyond a privilege. It was kind of surreal.
It's a hugely inspiring film. It makes you feel like, when I left it, I wanted to see it again, and then I just thought maybe a bit like when you went for the role in itself. It makes you just think, whatever you want to do, just go and do it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it gives. I think it's a very confident film.
If you dream it, you'll do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you dream it, you'll do it. I'm not all out of dreams yet.
Not out of dreams yet.